Fighting games have always been a primarily multiplayer experience. As such, many fighting game players trying to find other players to compete against to test their might, you might say. And thus, the FGC was born, the fighting game community. But what's the point of being the best at something if nobody can see you do it? Tournaments started gaining popularity. More people came to participate in them, and more people started to spectate them. This started to happen with video games at large, to the point where we now have this weird thing I don't completely understand called esports. But to this quote-unquote sport, how important is the audience? This is something I've been thinking about since a lot of us are participating in social distancing. Tournaments have been cancelled, locals have shut down. We can still play online and we can stream on Twitch these tournaments, these online tournaments. But can these online tournaments really fill the void left by tournaments and locals? How important really is the presence of an audience in a fighting game tournament? Because a lot of people and a lot of the community and official tournaments are trying to move into these esports, I'm gonna look at this as if it were a sport. There are all kinds of sports, different flavors, different rules, the same actual thing but in a different arena with different rules, that it makes it complicated. So I'm just gonna refer to spectator sports. This basically refers to a sport that people want to watch, and there are ways to watch it, like through TV or you can listen to the radio or whatever. With a lot of sporting events cancelled, they have turned to video games to give the audience what they want. Formula 1 and NASCAR have held Grand Prix in their respective video games. Some countries have put the soccer players to play FIFA online and have put it on national TV so people could watch something. People crave to see these competitions, but fighting games are a little different. There have been a number of controversies surrounding the audience. There's been heckling, there's been people not comfortable with the space you have at the pool setup. Top players preferring to attend invitational tournaments because it's way more comfortable for them and they can play in better conditions. At the same time, every single new tournament, the big ones, the majors, have had more attendees, more spectators. We now have Evo at a fucking arena. Honestly, personally, I do not consider fighting games to be spectator sports. Mainly because I believe there are different psychological things happening when we watch a football match or a basketball match than when we watch a fighting game tournament. According to Richard Sun, professor of sociology at the Pennsylvania College of Technology, I'm sorry if I mispronounced the name, a typical sports fan experiences two psychological phenomenon, which is vicarious identification and reification. Vicarious identification, being the easiest to explain from the two, is, simply put, identifying yourself with someone else. When you watch a movie, read a story, watch a show, you can identify yourself with some of the characters. You can, experience the things they're experiencing through the show, even if you're not really there. This happens a lot with sports fans. My family is full of sports fanatics, and you don't know how many times I've heard, "We lost," "We won." It's basically the same. They're not really playing with the team, they're really not winning anything, but they still feel like they did. They feel like they're part of the team. This is a little different in Formula 1. I don't know much about NASCAR, but in Formula 1, even though there are racing teams, a lot of people are fans of a specific driver, and they are glad the driver won. That's not to say that there are people that still support the racing team as the team, like saying, "I always support Sauber. Sauber is my favorite team, I'm glad we won." But I never hear this from fighting game fans. I never heard anyone say, "We finally won. We finally won," when Justin Wong won the Marvel tournament, retaking his title as king. I still see identification with some players, but I wouldn't call it vicarious identification. Most of it is rooting for the underdog, because if we're not there, it means we're not really that good to be at top 8 level. But the underdog is trying to make it. If he can make it, maybe I could one day make it. I wouldn't call it vicarious identification. I would just call it normal identification because you're both technically underdogs. You don't identify yourself as being him, but you identify with a small part of who you think they are. Reification is way more complicated. It's treating an abstract concept or mental construct as if we're real. This is way easier to explain with this example of sports. When someone is supporting a team, they are supporting that team. They're not really supporting the players. The Lakers have to win because it's the Lakers, as if the Lakers were a living person. If you don't believe me, just think of that uncle that really loves the Lakers, and when some good player left, they called them a traitor. How dare they leave my Lakers for another team? What a traitor. In Formula 1 it doesn't happen that much, as I said, because drivers are the drivers. They have way more presence. And in fighting games, you don't really hear this. No one is like, oh, they left Echo Fox, what a traitor. No, because the player is the player, they are their own person. So am I saying that the audience doesn't really matter to fighting games? No. I think the presence of an audience is actually really important to fighting games. And I'll tell you why with just one word. Community. It is the fighting game community. This all started with people going to their friend's house to play a fighting game. With people gathering over an arcade machine because a kid is having a 15-win streak against other people. I've always believed audience participation is really important to fighting games, but not everyone shares my sentiment. Some TOs and tournaments count people screaming in the audience as coaching. If I were to look at a soccer match and this guy is shouting, "Shoot! Just shoot!" would that count as coaching? I don't think so. But sometimes there is really no one in the audience, and that guy shouting is actually audible and actually helps the player. This has happened in a Smash tournament, because of course if there's any controversy it has to be fucking Smash, right? By the way, I'm not pointing at anyone, not naming any names because I don't like to do that. Except for Mr. Wizard, he can just block me on Twitter. An actual rule for people shouting things like that in a tournament would be really weird to enforce, and it would be easily abusable because people will want to participate because this is a community. So if a player is like, nah, that guy was shouting so I didn't lose, the TO might say, yeah, you know what, you're right, you didn't lose, that guy won, even though it wasn't audible. It also comes to the discretion of the TOs. Like in the Evo Smash tournament, of course, again, Smash, coaching was not allowed, but a player was coached mid-set. Let's say player 1 was coached, and then a friend of player 2's came in and just made fun of the coaching. He just did some nonsense and laughed with his friend player 2 to make fun that his opponent was being coached. When player 2 lost, because player 1's coaching actually worked and he adapted to something he wasn't adapting, player 2 said, "Coaching is not allowed in the rules, I should have won. The rules say I actually win this time because you were coached." Mr. Wizard, one of the heads of Evo, came in and said, "No, you both were coached, so the result still stands." It was clear that player 2 didn't receive any coaching, but because the TO said he did, there was nothing to do about it. I believe that screaming in a crowd, whatever you want to scream, be it coaching, as long as it's not any hate speech or anything, should be allowed. If you're the only one screaming, and you're coaching, and the coaching is actually working, I think that's pretty messed up, but again, it's to the discretion of the TOs at this point. But what if you're the only one screaming, even if it's not coaching, in the pool setup? I went to Combo Breaker 2017, and I saw someone's pool match. What I assume was their significant other was screaming at the top of their lungs. It wasn't any heckling, it wasn't any coaching, it was just screaming in support of their significant other. One of the setups I played with in my pool match actually didn't have the sound on the right side of the headset, and I could hear a bunch of what was happening around me. If that same person was there screaming, I sure as hell would have heard it. I personally didn't mind it. It didn't really bother me, but I can see how it could bother other people. I personally think it should be allowed. As a community, the participation is important. What would the fighting game community be if no one could say somebody's getting fucked? Somebody's getting fucked. I also believe things like booing should be allowed, although discouraged, specifically if something happens like in that Evo Smash tournament where the Bayonetas did nothing, because they were also being harassed outside of the games. There's also been some players that complain about the space in pools, that there's too many people congregating there, and it's not comfortable and you cannot even lean back because there's people right there. A rule for this would be a little too much, but I think people should be a little more courteous when it comes to this. Give them a little space, don't suffocate anyone. I talk big about this community aspect, but a lot of people don't share the sentiment, as I already said. Top players and other people in the community would rather have like a vacuum where people play in their top condition. I do not think fighting games are sports, and the esports kinda wants to take them that way, but ignoring some other things, it's weird. For me, fighting games is more of a community where everyone can participate. During these pandemic times, I more greatly appreciate the participation, the shouting, the exchanging looks with people when something happens. Like someone did something hype in a casual and they just hit the share button and saved the clip, and they just looked around like nothing, and I looked at them nodding the same way. Just little things like that is for me what makes fighting games, the community specifically, special. I talk a lot about community in this video, but you have to take it with a grain of salt because the FGC never agrees on anything. The rules for all majors are different, there's different rules for coaching here and there, and the FGC can't even agree on having good online for their games, so just take it with a grain of salt. At this point, I'm only rambling. Thank you all for watching if you did. See you next time.